Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My amendment calls for a GAO study to study the ways that the private insurance market can contribute to insuring against flood damage, to further study the impact on the National Flood Insurance Program if communities decide actually not to participate in this program, and to study the feasibility of recognizing the National Flood Insurance Program and ensuring that there's no cross-subsidization between the regions. The United States, Mr. Speaker, is actually the only industrialized nation that uses our form of government to administer flood insurance. In every other industrialized nation, this is done by the private insurance company. Even in Canada or the UK, they use the private industry to do so. And I believe that the role of the U.S. government in terms of flood insurance certainly is the creation and maintenance of accurate flood maps, and to have those that live in flood-prone areas, though, pay their own freight by purchasing private flood insurance. Since Congress established the NFIP, we have engaged in subsidizing our fellow Americans who do live in flood-prone areas, essentially creating a moral hazard. And as a result, more than half of the U.S. populations now live in coastal watershed counties or floodplain areas. My constituents in Michigan, and that's the reason I offered this amendment, Mr. Speaker, are paying very, very high flood insurance premiums, and yet we really rarely receive claims. I mentioned this during general debate, but I'll mention it again. Since 1978, Michigan residents have actually received about $44 million in claims from the flood insurance program. However, this year alone, our premiums in the state are going to be almost $20 million, which means that in 2 years of premiums, we have covered all of our losses since 1978. In other words, paid over $200 million in premiums, yet we've sent more than $150 million to other states since '78. And I would guess that all of the Great Lakes states, all of the states that are in the Great Lakes Basin, would have similar experiences. And so my constituents and the residents of my state, I think, are unfairly carrying a very high burden given their relatively low risk. I think it's a very vivid demonstration when you see that the average premium for flood insurance in Michigan is $764, and yet in Louisiana it's $647. I think, Mr. Speaker, again, we need to have a national catastrophic fund. We are very sensitive and very sympathetic to folks that live in states that flood, that are flood prone, that have hurricanes, etc. But I don't think it is fair for property owners in areas that don't have this high risk to keep paying so much money for other areas. I think we should try to share the burden among the entire states. I would also ask that the GAO would look at regionalization of the national flood insurance programs as a means to correct this balance. Currently, FEMA has 10 separate regions, and I believe that if you did this amongst those regions, perhaps that would be a good way to reorganize the flood insurance program. And so each region would then ideally have actuarially sound premiums that are reflective of the risk of that region. And I think under that plan, states like Michigan, again, would not be forced to subsidize other parts of the nation that have substantially higher risks than we do. And in lieu of that, the last part of the study for the GAO would look at the impacts of communities to actually opt out of this program. Mr. Speaker, several years ago, I actually wrote a letter to our governor asking her to consider having Michigan, our entire state, to opt out of this program because we are so unfairly disadvantaged. And although that has not happened yet, I'm going to continue to press that, because I do think if we self-insured and got out of this program, it would be much, much, much better for the state of Michigan to do so. So again, my amendment asks that the GAO to look at, I think, several common sense ways to fix a very severely flawed program, and I would ask that my colleagues consider my amendment and support its adoption as well. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from Michigan Resource Balance.